Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, supporting data and analytics infrastructure, tools, and strategies that drive innovation. Thank you so much for joining us on the EcoCast. We've got a great event lined up for you. On this event, you'll hear from experts at Faction, Gigamon, and A-Tempo. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. There are a few things you should know about the event before we get started. We've got some awesome prizes lined up. I'll talk about the 3 Amazon $500 gift cards in just a moment, as well as the prize eligibility requirements. We also have our best question prize that we're running today. Speaking of which, we want your questions. We want this to be an educational event, as we do with all of our events here at Actual Tech Media. We're all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be in the world of enterprise IT. I encourage you to use the questions panel there in your audience console, and we'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our expert presenters here on the live event. We also have a few poll questions for you out there in the audience. I'll be bringing up those polls, and I'll share the results of the poll questions with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers. You can tweet directly from the console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. Today's hashtag ATM EcoCast. So we appreciate you helping to spread the good word about what we're doing here with the EcoCast and MegaCast event series. We have a number of resources there in the handouts tab. I encourage you to check those out for more information on today's solutions. The prizes on the EcoCast today are 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify. I will be announcing the winner after each of the 3 presentations on the EcoCast today. All prize winners must be able to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We're also running our best question prize for a $50 Amazon gift card for each session. With 3 sessions, that's 3 Amazon $50 gift cards. We'll be awarding those gift cards based on the best questions we received today and contacting the prize winners after the event. You must, of course, also meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy, which you can find in the handouts tab of your audience console. Thanks to generous prize winners over the years, we have donated thousands of dollars to charities that you see here on the screen. We've done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can download free educational IT books at gorilla.guide. You can find a link to that right there in the handouts tab as well. As I said, the hashtag for today is ATM EcoCast, and if you tweet using the Twitter icon on the bottom of your screen, that will be automatically appended. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. You can follow me on Twitter, David M. Davis, and Actual Tech Media as well. You'll find Actual Tech Media on YouTube, Facebook, and in the iTunes Store, where we have the 10 on Tech podcast. We record all of our events and post those on our YouTube channel, so make sure that you subscribe to that as well. You'll find links to all of these social channels on the top right-hand side of your console, including LinkedIn, which is where we post all of our latest and greatest content. Now, before I introduce you to today's first expert presenter, I want to talk briefly about today's topic of supporting data and analytics infrastructure, tools, and strategies to help you drive innovation. I think we all know that managing your company's data is one of the most important and critical things that you can do, and there's a lot to it. I mean, there's data governance, architecture, modeling, design, database management, storage management, security, integrations. There are multiple forms of data warehousing and data lakes and business intelligence. You have metadata management, and you're always trying to ensure data quality and data security. And more, as the saying goes, our data is like our company's gold, if you will. Data is being used around the world for just about everything that you can imagine. There's data in space, data underwater, real-time data in the air. Maybe some of you are even watching this via the new high-speed satellite options. Our companies use data to manufacture everything that we do, and then we analyze what we've manufactured and everything we sold. We keep data on our customers and our clients and our suppliers. And yes, there are malicious attackers who are actively trying to steal and sell this data. Even foreign governments trying to attack our companies to gain competitive advantage. Data is being used in all areas of health to find cures for pandemics and prevent diseases before they happen. That health data is also being shared sometimes for good, sometimes not so good. But no matter how that data is used, we in IT are continually challenged with our data. Data management, data scalability, data security, data analytics, network analytics, and we're looking for ways to use the cloud to more intelligently leverage this data. And that's why I'm so excited about today's topic on this event. You'll learn how to intelligently leverage multi-cloud for data analytics with Faction. You'll learn about the new visibility in Analytics Fabric from Gigamon. And finally, how to protect, migrate, and analyze petascale data sets with a Tempo Miria. We've got a great event lined up for you, but first, I want to ask you a couple of poll questions. I want to learn about your data management and analytics challenges. All right, I just brought up the first poll question on the screen there in the slides window. I want to call your attention to that. The question is, which of these are your greatest data and analytics challenges? And this is a multi-select question, so you can select more than one. You may have more than one challenge, obviously. Most of us do. And I'll share the results, again, of the poll with you, and you can see how you stack up with your peers on the event today. And then the final option on the poll is maybe you have a challenge that isn't listed. I tried to think of as many challenges as I could, but I'm confident that you have challenges that are not listed there around data and analytics. So I encourage you to drop those in the questions panel. It's right there next to the handouts panel, and I'll share your challenges with everyone on the event. I see the first one that came in from Scott. Scott said security controls around data are one of his challenges. A great point. I should have added that. I'll have to add that to the poll next time. That should be on there. I agree. Security around data is a big challenge. I talked about that a little bit in my keynote as well. All right, I see a lot of responses coming in. Thank you for those. In just a moment, I'll share the results of this poll with you. And the results should be on your screen. It looks like 52% said capacity and performance around data. And then it's almost a head-to-head tie here between all of the remaining four options around cost, value, cloud, visibility. 7% said they did not have their challenge wasn't listed on the poll question, so I encourage you to drop that in the questions box. We appreciate your feedback, and I hope that you found that poll valuable as well. Got you thinking about data and analytics a little bit, and you can see how you stack up with others who are on the event. Second poll of two, before I introduce you to the first presenter, is on the screen now, and that's what's your time frame for adding new or updating your existing data and analytics solutions. So if you have something in your mind here, a project around data and analytics, what's your time frame for getting that going? We appreciate your feedback on this one as well. I'll give you a moment to answer that. All right, just responding to some of these comments in the questions box. Thank you for those, and thank you to the responses to the poll on the screen. It's now time to kick off the EcoCast with our first expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Jay Cothrell, Vice President of Solutions at Faction. Jay, are you there?
I am here. Thank you so much for the warm introduction.
Great to have you, Jay. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody making time today. What we're going to be covering is the case for multi-cloud. Talk a little bit about how we support data and analytics infrastructure, the tools, and the strategies that are going to drive innovation. Just a little bit about Faction. Faction was founded in 2006 in Denver, Colorado. We have now hundreds of petabytes under management. We're in 9 cloud locations around the world. We have thousands of end customers. We have a growing number of patents, which if you'd like to learn more about those, you can go to our website at factioninc.com. If you're curious about some of our expertise, we are a Dell Technologies Platinum partner. We're also partners with folks like VMware, AWS, and others. And we're also financially backed by Dell Technologies Capital. So they've put money into it. And we're really, again, happy that everybody is here. And so let's just jump into it. A little bit about me. I have been with Faction for 141 or 142 days. I have to go back and check the math. I joined back in December. I was after a fairly extensive career at companies like Dell Technologies, before that EMC, VCE, Acadia, my own consulting practice, and even places like Digitel, Neonova Network Services during the dot-com days, Sonnet and IXL, Nortel and AIC before that. I was even a co-op at IBM back in the days of TCP/IP, IP stacks for OS2, Warp Connect, and AX 412. I still have a blog at fudge.org if you're having trouble sleeping at night, want to read some essays. Mostly I just mess around with CMS, headless specifically, and continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines. My email is there if you have any questions. You can also tweet at me on Twitter. I do tend to wipe that with Tweepy via API periodically, but if you have a question, I can reply back there. Now, today we're going to learn about solutions. We're going to identify some use cases, and then I'm going to try to cover some frequently asked questions. There is a question module. I would encourage you to put your questions in place. Even if we can't get to those questions today during the presentation, we will absolutely get questions returned back to you through this process. So any questions are highly encouraged. Looking forward to getting some of those in. All right. So let's start with some data definitions. So if you're familiar, if you've heard of the term data warehouse, a very structured way, kind of your online transactional processing way of viewing the world. You probably heard of data lakes, where you kind of keep your data in place and then you would extract as needed, do some transformation, some loading. You may have even heard of data puddles, not to be confused with Puddle's Pillow Party, for those of you who are jazz interpretation fans of songs. These are examples of ways you could more discreetly put together, say for a small team, you'd have a data puddle. And then data swamp, this is a really awful, trashy picture of a swamp. I think swamps are actually quite beautiful, a lot of vibrant ecosystem enabled for the way in which biology around us surrounds us. So swamps are actually quite beautiful, but a data swamp, unfortunately, is any of these other examples, whether it's a warehouse, a lake, a puddle, where there is simply not real governance and care and attention to curating of the data that's involved. So we'll go through some of these in a little more detail later, but just want to get some of those definitions out of the way. You've probably even heard of lake house, which is a blend of where you have the warehouse approach and you have the data lake approach, where you can get some of the best of both worlds, for example. Now, let's just talk about the dashboards. Everyone, when we talk about data analytics, they have this kind of mindset of, this is absolutely where we get a dashboard. And while impressive, the past 20 years have really shown that dashboards have probably hit an inflection point. And what's going to happen now is it will be less about a dashboard and more about how a user is thinking about what they're trying to find an answer to. And so another way to think of this is we've all kind of been conditioned when you have a question, you would go to a search engine to get that question answered. And so predefined dashboards are probably reaching their nadir. And as a result, Gartner would conclude, you're going to see references to things throughout this presentation to kind of give you a heads up. At the very end, there is a big, long link list of kind of like a bibliography. So don't feel like you have to copy any of this down. And so the next quote I will pull through is that by 2025, just doing some future projection, most of the consumerization that's being described by Gartner around what a data analytics dashboard would mean, it's more around how do you drive a process, make a decision, and have this be a very interactive, augmented approach. And so I'll drive into that a little bit more. So let's look at some of the solutions that are in existence today. There are many. So if you go to Amazon, you look at Azure, you look at Google's cloud platform that's evolved, you've got literally hundreds. And I've got another slide later that will talk about the hundreds of options. But these are just a few. And some of the stars are for where there's a pending name change or it's actually operated by a third party. You can even go through and highlight some of the various Apache open source projects or acqui-hires of other companies that have formed these individual services that live with each of these cloud environments. But sufficient to say that innovation's taking place at all of the above. And so a question might come up, well, if dashboards are moving from static rendered items to more interactive items, And then there's this notion of augmentation that's taking place. Where do I want to be, and how do I want to position myself for success if I'm dealing in data and analytics? And so let's look at some history. And there's a lot going on here, so I'll just try to net it out. So if you go all the way back to the early days, Google Cloud, BigQuery, internally being run in 2005, Amazon Web Services coming into being, and on the right-hand side, I work for Faction. So in the bluer light to the right, that's actually the original name of the company was Elementech LLC, founded in 2006. And so as you go into 2010, you have DynamoDB from Amazon, Kinesis, Aurora. You have people calling things private, public, or hybrid clouds. Azure enters market. AWS comes with its first truly high-speed, low-latency connectivity called AWS Direct Connect. The company I'm with now, Faction, renamed itself as Peak Colo, took its first set of funding. By 2015, you've got the HoloLens, kind of like if you imagine yourself with goggles on doing something. AWS Sumerian is released. And so the things I've put in that darker block outline are really around this augmented story I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And then, of course, in the data science world and in the analytics world, you have HD Insight coming from Azure. You got ExpressRoute, which is high-speed connectivity for like AWS did with Direct Connect. This is the Azure version. And even Google did this with their own partner interconnects. And then Faction actually rebrands itself, expands its data center footprint. By the time we're in 2020, the HoloLens is now in its second generation. Azure Connect is now being released. And even things like the original BigQuery, which would have been back in 2005, or the elements of it would built up to this, you now have Omni in beta, which is their ability to use Anthos to put things like queries closer to where the data might live, so a distributed approach, if you will. And Faction actually started a multi-cloud story around the same time frame. I joined in December, and there's an article above that, the frameworks then and now, and real soon now. That was something I did back in 2015 around big data governance and some other items. And I was a writer for a blog called ReadWrite. It's called ReadWrite Web back then. And there was a section called Hack. And in the Hack section, I did an article where I took a closer look at the rise of the data scientist in 2010. And so in 2010 to 2015 to 2020, what I think we're going to go with when that Gartner quote I gave for 2025, I really think this is about AI, augmentation, and what the adoption curve is going to look like for how we truly interact with what has traditionally been, again, dashboard-centric views of what it means to be in data and analytics. And so the last part of that piece, the blue part to the right, is ubiquity in cloud data services and it being a very multi-cloud approach. And so just to drill into that a little bit, what if we took the proverbial needle and the haystack, and this is from that presentation I did back in 2015, and trying to find the needle in the haystack might have sounded really difficult. The picture to the right is a 20-ton electromagnet that was created for superconductivity-oriented stories. And if you did need to find a needle in a haystack, if you turn that thing on, I guarantee you will easily, quickly find that needle in the haystack. And this is a bit of a metaphor for what we see now in modern data analytics. These cloud service providers have hyperscale capabilities, massive amounts of compute ready and available at your disposal. And so as we move forward, if we look at some of the trends that are happening, again, just going back to something that Gartner has gathered, Gartner now knows that customers are probably spending more on cloud than they would have thought. We know that the notion of a private cloud, even a hosted private cloud, is also accelerating. We also know that when we describe what a private cloud or off-premises would mean in terms of how many of those customers that they talk to are actually doing these things, they know that that is a very growing market. They also know that easily 2/3 are going to need to have more than just public clouds. They're going to have a little bit of augmentation on both sides. And we also now know that when they look at what it means to run or operate data centers, there will be some amount of evacuation. And then the hybrid term is going to come up a bit, which is where we really tried doing public cloud. We really liked parts of it, but there are other things where for economic reasons, meaning something that from a data analytics point of view is running continuously, maybe using a public cloud service provider did not provide the most commensurate or economic approach to solving that problem. And so, again, just wanted to identify some of the use cases. Now, this is a couple of examples. On the upper left, an example of what a financial person might want to look through in terms of Instead of a dashboard, it's an interactive, immersive way of looking at what would be a traditional dashboard, but through a mechanism of I have additional metadata stories to the left. I have a dashboard really in front of me that is kind of a skeuomorphic of that in virtual reality. And then I have actual real-time data populating in front of me. On the upper right, if you're familiar with companies like Splunk that do things like log regression and analysis for IT organizations, we have everything from everywhere in your IT environment logging in all one place. But you want to find, again, that needle in the haystack. How can I correlate and suss out what's truly happening from a root cause point of view? That's an example of their view of what VR might look like for their own dashboards and what they're doing in the future. On the lower left, you have something in the biopharma and drug-oriented area where you're trying to find correlative values related to a specific type of disease or other information in that regard. And then on the lower right, from one of the more computer science-driven organizations, trying to illustrate what it would be like to do a virtual shoulder surfing or seeing or understanding other viewer or user aspects when you're trying to collaborate on big data problems. The ability to literally put yourself in someone else's shoe and look at a problem from their actual perspective in a VR environment. And so if you're familiar with collaborating today, whether it's on Slack or Microsoft Teams, imagine when you're doing that with a headset and you're immersing yourself into and analyzing data sets in a collaborative manner. I think a lot of the stories we have seen in prior years that would claim that, virtual reality, augmented reality is just around the corner. It's important to understand that multi-user collaboration will be an important piece of what comes next. And so if I haven't impressed upon you at this point that there's a lot of innovation happening, let's continue. Again, what drives the data use? This is some of the answers section. We're trying to anticipate some questions. And so one of the first one was, what's driving the data use? Well, again, Amazon, Azure, Google, you can even throw Oracle in here, IBM, it just keeps increasing. And so when we talk about what it means for someone to take advantage or drive innovation, the data uses are key. So these are from Cloud Pegboard, 305 plus from Amazon, hundreds obviously with Azure, and over 100 with Google Cloud Platform, and it'll grow. Every time there's a reInvent or a Google I/O, et cetera, these are all going to increase. So when we think of where you have to look or seek out, where's the next innovation wave going to come from? It's probably going to be in all of the above. It'll come from not just one cloud, it'll come from all of the other clouds around that cloud as well. There will always be competition. There'll always be one-upsmanship. And so for that reason, when we ask the question, what's actually driving multi-cloud? It's pretty straightforward. It's that cloud spending is going to accelerate. At least 2 out of 3 companies are going to feel it's insufficient to have a single public cloud that does everything for them. They become curious. Maybe you're in a research and development environment. You find out that there's research and development credits that give you access to hyperscaler process on demand. And because you have these credits, why would you not use them? Why would you not try the other alternative cloud that you're not on? And because of that reason, companies are going to continue to evaluate and look at what's commensurate with what they get from existing on-premises data center spend. That could take 2 forms. One, they could evacuate completely from their data center footprint, go completely into these clouds. More likely, it's a rationalization. It's to say, what is the amount of data center I would want to retain for my own purposes, again, economically, to run something that's a long-running job in perpetuity. And then the last one really is, once you've started down that path of evaluating the various advantages and disadvantages of the various clouds and where your data lives, you're probably coming across data gravity, which has specific performance implications related to the speed of light. How quickly could you hydrate, rehydrate, if you go back to your extraction, transform, or load, or your extraction, load, and transform considerations? How quickly can you move, for example, petabytes of data or terabytes of data? It really does depend on how large your corpus is and where that corpus is coming from, where it's going to be rendered, delivered, whether it's a specific warehouse, the lake we talked about, or even a lake house, all of those examples in between. And so for that reason, when we say, well, great, Faction, you've talked a little bit about all these other things, and we've identified some, what is Faction? So Faction clearly stated is, we know all of our clients will have the following capabilities that they want to take advantage of, whether they're doing a data warehouse, they've got a data lake, or they have a lake house approach, maybe they're working with a Databricks or a Yellowbrick or someone like this. whether they're interested in business intelligence applications or just taking advantage of general replatforming of their own application stacks, doing things differently using cloud native approaches. There will probably be an analytics component. Increasingly, we think that all of our customers, all of our clients will be doing machine learning. It is not a question of if, but when. And ultimately, what leads into a desire for any artificial intelligence or a microservice approach to doing things. So for the flexible deployments piece in the center, we've got the following. Every single one of these is going to be a potential center of innovation. Could come from Amazon, could come from Azure, could come from Oracle or Google, could be the cloud to be named later. It could also be something that's in the existing data center, meaning that the modernization, the automation, and the transformation of an existing data center footprint is taking place to enable a cloud consumption process. It is a consumption model. The cloud is not necessarily a location. And at Faction, the word move is a 4-letter word. Our position is that you should have data in place, single copy, and then access that data, that single copy, from any and all of the above. That is our approach to solving what we believe is the singular challenge of the next 5 to 6 years, which is how do you access all of the innovation from all of the clouds simultaneously? And so at a very high level, what we're looking for here is when we tell a story about Faction, when we talk about what's possible with our customers and what they may want to be doing in the future, these are some of the areas we ask them. What are your stories that you want to see happen as it relates to your data warehouse, your intelligence, and regardless of which cloud that you may have started with, the cloud that you're curious about, or maybe the multiple clouds you're already dealing with, what would it mean for you to have a single copy of your data that's accessible simultaneously at this point in time? And where would you maybe want to be in the future? So again, I just wanted to make sure that we had set that table. Obviously, there's going to be some follow-ons. We've done several of these EcoCasts. I would encourage you to look back at our prior EcoCast that we've delivered as Faction. We've even got more coming. The things we'll talk about next in our EcoCast series will be solving some data challenges as it relates to the actual big data itself, how you're implementing your warehouse, whether you're actually doing a lake or a lake house approach, the analytics and the data science considerations behind it, some of the challenges that you may want to overcome along the way, what we think are some success criteria there. And again, because we're Faction, we're going to talk a lot about the multi-cloud synergies. And so what I'll leave you with are some links. Please click on these. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. And the last thing, we actually have a new white paper on data warehouses and data lakes in a data-first, cloud-first world. Really would encourage everybody to go check that out. At this point, I'm going to stop talking and go look at our questions.
Great presentation, Jay. We do have some questions for you. And while we do that, I'm just going to bring up the poll for everyone out there in the audience to see if you'd like additional information or what form of additional information you would like on this solution from Faction. There's multiple options on there. And again, we'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. So let's see, Jay, first question I wanted to ask you here is, I'm curious to get your insight on this. Any idea when do you think people will be walking around with VR headsets in the workplace? I thought that was a good question.
Well, I think we all need to get back to a workplace. That would be kind of first step. So we have to wait for wait for the post-pandemic reality for those of you who are watching historically. Once we're in a post-pandemic reality, I really do believe that there will be situations that will be a combination of things. So I had called out, and I'm not making this an Azure specific story. I think that all of the cloud providers will have partnerships in this regard. There will be a couple of things. There'll be the headsets, but I also think the important part will also be proxemic sensoring, meaning that there's another camera watching your physical proximity in a room or a region of movement, so that it can place you or your avatar, for lack of a better term, in the sense of a wireframe or what looks like a puppet. And so that way someone has awareness of where your back is, where your hand is, where your head is. And I think that really will unlock some of the collaboration. My best guess would be within the proverbial 3 to 5 years, because a lot of the costs will be drawn down. A lot of the processing capabilities, if you weren't aware of it, there's even headsets now that can be driven by a mobile phone. And so that discrete compute capacity that would fit in your pocket, that would be able to drive a headset, will make it far more accessible and permissible within enterprise settings. And I think it'll probably go with your first stories of, well, engineering-led. It'll probably also be heavily CAD CAM or influenced kind of design views where you can kind of explode the view, contract the view. But I would say 3 to 5 years is a reasonable bet based on the pace of innovation taking place, not just in the headset, but also in the third-party proxemic capture of a camera off-board for the situational dynamics of the room. And then, of course, related to that, the compactness of processing power that would fit either in your pocket or not necessarily mandate or require wires. So that would be my best guess.
Okay, interesting. There's a couple more questions that came in here around AR and VR. Do you believe that these technologies have lived up to the hype, or will they soon?
So if Gartner was here, they would give you all the different parts of the hype curve. And so I don't know that we're necessarily in the valley of disillusionment in any way, shape, or form. I just don't think we have enough out there to be there. I think for purpose-specific use cases where you know that a collaboration is possible, I think those are the things that unlock, I believe, insights that would not normally be available. I think the tendencies we all think of, we go in with our headset and look at the thing that we care about. I want to press upon everyone. The reason why dashboards exist was so that other individuals could look at a dashboard. And so I think of not the headset as an individual experience, but as a collaborative, immersive experience. I think if there are individuals that want to have individual experiences and explore around that, that's great. But the true insights will come when it's 3 or 4 individuals working together, kind of like your minimum team that can be fed by a pizza. Getting the team that can be fed by a single pizza, getting them into the exact same immersive is really the key. It can't be about a single person being able. It has to be about collaboration. That's my perspective.
Yeah, you make a great point. It reminds me of the Microsoft HoloLens commercial. Not to hype on Microsoft, but their commercial for the HoloLens solution was really cool. How students were working together with augmented reality, workers were working together. So I could see the productivity, value of these types of technologies with that. Let's see. Yeah, another good question that came in here. They're asking about what are the best data analytics stories that you've heard in the past year? Any thoughts on that one?
I remember someone telling me something about some of the remote sensing and telemetry that was possible in countries like Israel, where if water leaks from the water system, their ability to pinpoint and understand at a very discrete level where the water is leaving. And it reminded me, here in the U.S., I keep hearing stories about there are still wood pipes delivering gas to parts of people's neighborhoods, or because we're a couple hundred years old now in the U.S., but knowing that there's still infrastructure in our ground that is wood pipes is fascinating to me. And so finding other data sets that are interesting and correlating them in interesting ways, the ability to pinpoint where the water is leaking, that was a pretty good story from my perspective.
That's amazing. I had no idea that that's the case. Wood pipes. Wow. Here's an interesting question. They say, in the near future, any idea what processes in the data analytics life cycle, like extracting, transforming, and loading into a data warehouse or reporting through dashboards, will most likely get automated?
I think, not to make it another commercial for another company, but I think if you look at the ecosystem of ETL or ELT players, Fivetran to me really stands out as one of those, keep your data in place, or if you're going from a one-to-one or an any-to-any or a many-to-many, I think there's going to be some really interesting combinations. If you look at the Snowflake ecosystem from a Technology Alliances program point of view, some really interesting stories there, because ultimately there's going to be players, whether it's the Snowflakes, the Palantirs, the others. There will be interesting stories that come up as it relates to, do I have to move my data? Can I make it? Can I have multiple lakes? Other people would give it different naming categories, but can I leave as much of the data in place? Can I process in place? And we won't touch on this one, but I think edge or fog computing and those paradigms or those shifts in thinking will be the ability to process discreetly as much as possible where the data was generated in the first place. the ability to not have to move it around the planet, to make localized decisions. Those are really interesting to me. And if you can imagine a moment where, the snowflake or the 5-tran lives within 15 to 20, very much feet or fractions of a second to get or return information. I think we are all kind of in that world of waiting for the progress bar to complete. And I want everyone to imagine a world where everything is so fast, we look back on it and marvel at how we ever got anything done in the good old days that were just 2 or 3 years ago.
Amazing. Well said there. Let's see. Another question. When you talk to customers about their data projects, are there any kind of best practices or processes that you typically go through to help ensure that those projects are a success, in the end?
Yeah, we usually start with data first principles, which I'd covered in a previous EcoCast here. And the idea is that not all data is the same. And I think segmentation and rationalization of your data sets is a really important topic. We want to make sure the economics are going to work. So making sure that the hot data is supplied with a solution that is fit for purpose, commensurate again for what those hot data needs are. If there's things that are archival or needing something that's on a very much periodic basis, or maybe even training a model with a known corpus and making sure that that's available in a general community sense, even setting up sharing patterns, just fundamentally understanding the pipeline and the collaborative nature of the pipeline is critical for us to be successful with the clients that we interact with. And because we're tied so closely to the infrastructure solution part of it, getting that single copy of data, understanding what is the most essential data that requires that single copy, what are the things that might not require a single copy, or are there multi-tenant needs, or is this a truly single-tenant project? What type of end-user views? Could we enable 20 views, or do we need to enable 2,000 different discrete views? And what are the implications there? So it's really fundamentally understanding the pipeline and the collaborative nature and the timeliness of the different data types that would be involved. Those are some highlights.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, Jay, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our live Q&A. There's some more technical questions for you in the queue there.
Great.
But great presentation. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great one. Cheers.
And thank you to the audience out there for all the excellent questions as well. I appreciate your responses to the poll question. I'm going to leave that up here while we draw for our first Amazon $500 gift card. All right, the winner of our first Amazon $500 gift card is Aaron Hilly from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Aaron Hilly from Wisconsin. We've got 2 more gift cards still to give out on the event today. And so stay tuned for those and 2 more expert presentations as well. So with that, let's go ahead and kick off our next presentation here. I'm excited now to introduce Mr. Bassam Khan, Vice President of Product and Technical Marketing Engineering at Gigamon. Bassam, it's great to have you on.
Great to talk to you again, David. Hope everything is going well.
Take it away.
Great. Thank you, David. Hello, everybody. My name is Bassam. I look after product marketing in a couple other areas here at Gigamon. What I'm going to talk about is hybrid cloud visibility. All of the words on this title on the slide here, as well as the topic that's today's sessions, apply to what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a gap that we're starting to see. We believe the gap is impacting customer and user experience. The gap is impacting security and compliance in the hybrid cloud infrastructure, and it's also adding to the complexity and the cost of the hybrid network. I will go through this pretty quickly. I will start off by talking about what the gap is, how to address that gap. I'll actually jump into a customer use case, and one that's in the news. Let me actually forward the slide here a little bit. There we go. One that's in the news with this customer, but it's in the news in a good way. This is a successful project. Usually being in the news is not a good thing. But let me first begin with an introduction to Gigamon. So For over a decade, Gigamon, we've been the inventor of this visibility fabric, we've been an innovator, we're the leader in this space. And now we're targeting our innovation, focusing our innovation on the hybrid cloud, which is the de facto infrastructure for most of the enterprises that we work with today and that use Gigamon. So looking at a couple of quick stats here, there's a lot of different stats. Let me just highlight a couple of those. So we're being used by the top Fortune 100 companies. We are in every single top 10 out of 10 federal agencies. But the two stats that matter the most to us is our customer satisfaction, which is a huge focus for us. It's a cultural thing here at Gigamon to make sure we're not leaving our customers, by themselves, that we're there to help them, and also the innovation. So we are a technology company. We've been innovating for many, many years, and we continue to innovate, and now that's applied to the hybrid cloud environment. A vast majority of our customers are operating in a hybrid cloud world. I took the stat from a presentation by the president of AWS, Andy Jassy, from the last user conference back in November. So basically the stat says that 88% of enterprises have some kind of a cloud strategy, but there's a disconnect. And the disconnect is that while there's 88% with a strong cloud strategy, where's the spend going to? It's going into the traditional infrastructure. It's going to maintaining existing infrastructure, the old wooden pipes, whatever else it might have in place. And there's a disconnect there, and Gigamon helps with that disconnect. We help with the migration to the cloud, and that's what I'll talk about. We have a pretty decent quote recently from Scott Ward, also from AWS, that talks about the need for visibility in the public cloud, in the hybrid cloud as well. It becomes even more important. So, Basam, we've been talking about visibility gap. What is that? Let's jump into that. So, if you look at a workload, an application, it could be an old application, it could be a new application. There is only a handful of places that that application can be running in, which is on premises or some sort of a private cloud on premises as well, or in the public cloud. Now, I've got tools that help me monitor that public cloud, monitor that workload, the application, make sure it's running fast, it's secure. And the set of tools that I have on premises tend to be different than the tools that I have with the native cloud platform. And that causes a problem. That's a challenge. Why? Because when I have two sets of tools, when it comes to finding out why David's machine or his application is not running well, I have to use different tools, different approaches, and so on to figure out what exactly happened and how I can improve the customer experience. Same thing with security. Understanding an active malware event, cyber event going on right now, if I don't have a centralized visibility and I have to use many, many different tools and platforms and so on, it makes it much, much harder. Compliance is a really good use case for that, an example of that, where if I had some tools on premises and I'm going to reinvent and refactor this workload to run in, let's say, in AWS, well, guess what? A lot of the compliances I have built around monitoring the traffic, around getting the right reports in based on that and so on, those will discontinue to work in the cloud. So I have to reinvent that entire infrastructure in the cloud. The third big challenge is managing the complexity and the cost. So you may have heard this before. Hopefully you haven't experienced a really bad case of this before. But when workloads get moved to the cloud, one of the first things once it's up and running is that, hey, this is a lot more expensive than I thought it was going to be. It's a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. So that's where the fourth big gap comes in. By having different sets of tools, different sets of platforms, it becomes harder to do cloud migrations. Why? Because you're going to have to reinvent the application for the cloud, and you have to reinvent the entire monitoring infrastructure, the security infrastructure, the compliances, the policies, the control, the knowledge, all of that, reinvent that in the cloud. Spoiler alert, wouldn't it be nice to be able to move all of that forward into the cloud? That buys you more time to reinvent, to refactor that monitoring part, because there's enough to worry about with the application itself, and then we have to worry a little bit less around monitoring. And that's where Gigamon comes in. We provide what's called the Visibility and Analytics Fabric. We can monitor, we can centralize visibility into any source of traffic coming in from any different platform, even down to a container level traffic. And we'll pull it all in, and we'll be able to send it to any destination you choose, any tool, if it's a cloud application, any tunnel, if you want to put it all into storage, we have customers putting our data into an S3 bucket. So this is not really full packets, but metadata that we're extracting from buckets into an S3 bucket, into an S3 store in the cloud. So any tools, any destination. And Run Anywhere basically says, it doesn't matter where the data is coming from. You're able to get a centralized view. And one of the common use cases for us is to, in the IoT world, is to take an existing IT infrastructure monitoring environment and then marry that with your IoT infrastructure. So you're not having to reinvent entire monitoring and security infrastructure for your for your ICS, for IoT, for your OT types of devices that are out there. So it's leveraging the existing knowledge, existing capability. And this is the value of having a centralized visibility fabric. One more slide on how we do it, and I'll talk a little bit more about the challenges, and I'll talk about the customer use case. So the way we do this is by centralizing all of the traffic into one place. First of all, that makes the process much easier for deploying any new tool. So if you think about it, let's kind of go back to the traditional on-premises infrastructure of a party like it's 2018, let's say. I've got a huge on-premises infrastructure. There's traffic, it's a very distributed environment. I've got a branch office in San Francisco, another one in Boston. I've got IoT, OT devices, and so on. And I want to deploy a new firewall or a new security tool that needs access to the traffic. You're going to have to take that tool and plug it into every single place where there might be some traffic, some east-west traffic happening. North-south's kind of easy to monitor, but you have to plug it in everywhere. With Gigamon, we get plugged in one time, so for that tool to be deployed, it's simply plugging into one single place. It makes it much, much easier. We said deploy tools in minutes, not months. That's kind of our motto, and that really is true in lots of cases. So that's the access part. But guess what? Once we've aggregated all of that data into one place, we can do some pretty cool transformation to that data. Example, we can, if there's encrypted traffic coming in and you need 2 or 3 or 10 of your tools need to get access to decrypted traffic, rather than having each tool do the decryption again and again and again and again, which is a very costly operation, we will decrypt it one time, all the way up to TLS 1.3. We'll decrypt it one time and then send it off to the tools and hide that decrypted traffic from certain tools. Another transformation example is packet deduplication. Typically, we see over 53% of our customers' environment, when you centralize all the traffic, are duplicate packets. So by deduplicating the packets, you instantly end up with almost twice the capacity because it's seeing half the packets without losing any fidelity of the data. Super important. So there are 15, 17 other transformation steps I won't get into, and last one is analytics. Analytics is basically we do deep packet inspection of the traffic and extract out metadata. What's the application? What's the TLS certificate that's being used? When will that certificate expire? So these are things that we can see running over the wire and then send it off to the tool. So that is the power of having a centralized vision. And the problems that it challenges I'll talk about the 4 things I talked about earlier. First one is around customer experience. Really around getting, making sure your customers and applications, which are now more and more and more distributed, having a single point of visibility on exactly what happened from a network perspective, from a data in motion perspective, whether the application logic resides in AWS, maybe a container in there. I've got some logic running on my VMware on premises, and then my data store is still on premises, Oracle database or whatever else it might be. Wouldn't it be cool to have one single place you go to that your tools plug in and lets you monitor and troubleshoot performance issues and so on? The same thing applies for security, and I'll really dive into security in the next slide. So having this visibility allows you to have and provide your customers with a high level of service that's 7/24. Number 2, securing the environment. So as I mentioned before, some compliances require visibility into security, into network traffic. So that is a super important use case. So as you're moving applications from physical to virtual to public cloud, you're able to maintain the same controls, policies, and compliance reports and so on that traffic. And we're finding that this is a big, big use case. So almost between a third and a quarter of our customers today use Gigamon for some level of cloud migration journey. And this is a super important function that we provide because we decrease the risk of project failure because of monitoring security issues that come up later. We also help with cost, which I'll touch on in just one second. But the notion here is that the same platform for securing the cloud infrastructure as you have as you've always been used to. And having this visibility allows you to make changes very, very quickly. So let's say I have one tool that does user experience monitoring, and I want to bring another tool in that's the more whiz-bang tool out there. Deploying that tool is super fast. Same thing goes with security. Same thing goes with analytics and any kind of monitoring security tool, because it's all centralized. Because you're simply plugging in and getting that data, getting access to all of the data in one place. So being able to move quickly, which is a big part of this session today, to drive innovation, which is all about journey to the cloud, which is all about being super nimble and being able to pivot quickly, you have to have this kind of a platform. Otherwise, getting access to the data becomes super challenging. And the last challenge that we address is complexity and cost, right? So as workloads move to the cloud, as I mentioned before, and I'd love to hear if your expectations of a cloud journey that you've gone through matches exactly the cost estimates that you had going in. Hats off to you. But every project that we've done, including ones I've done at Gigamon with one of our labs here, moving that purely to the cloud, we found surprise costs, leaving workloads running, and people don't think about shutting them down because on premises I didn't need to shut those down. I can go on and on, but there's surprising costs, and that's what Gigamon helps you provide visibility into. When there's network traffic going across networks, we'll optimize. So let's say you have a use case where you set up a new whiz-bang tool in your AWS environment, but you've got workloads running in Google Cloud, you've got workloads running in Azure on premises, and you want to send the data over. Well, if you were to send all the data over, it's going to get expensive very quickly. So how about you choose to send NetFlow data or some kind of a packet header data only to let's say to your SIM in AWS. But when you see some behavior, so David's machine is acting up. David, I'm sorry to pick on you so much. David's machine is acting up, or his machine is contacted a suspicious site. For that person, we want to send full packet. I don't want to only see NetFlow and see everything he's doing over to the new tool in AWS. So having this kind of a capability and flexibility of automated visibility brings super powerful capabilities in your cloud journey, in your innovation. Let's look at one example. As I mentioned, this has been in the news in a good way, and that is the Census Bureau. So the census results are coming out now, and we're seeing lots of news. But guess what? It's not like they just started the project, they just got the numbers, they did the census a couple of years ago and just went out. There was a lot of work that needed to happen. They had to bring together multiple agency systems, private sector systems, in order for them to be able to go out and execute the census. So they had to pull it all together into one platform. I can't really get too much into the details of how they did that. They worked with a reseller called T-Rex, an amazing job there. Pulling all of the data together into a single visibility platform, and Gigamon was central to being able to have a single point of visibility in this cloud environment that they had set up. So a ton, 500,000 concurrent users beating up on the system. When some application slows down, their need to respond quickly when a census study is going on is critical. As well as security, because any government agency, any government system, as everybody knows, is a very big target for all kinds of cyber threat actors out there. And decryption was also super important. Following the zero trust model, basically the communication should be encrypted, and not being able to centrally decrypt would mean that all of their tools had to do the decryption, which gets really expensive when you add it up, because turn on decryption, your throughput for that tool will drop down by 30, 40, 70, 80% sometimes. So centralizing that has been very, very powerful. So we're very happy with this project. It went on the surface, not everything goes perfectly, but on the surface, the overall project was a big resounding success, and we're starting to see the results coming in right now. So very, very proud of that. So in closing, Gigamon is a visibility platform that lets our customers see all of the data in motion in a hybrid cloud environment. That's easy to say, very difficult to do without a solution such as ours. That allows our customers to have better security because you can see all the traffic. You know, the old saying, it's a cliche by now, you can't secure what you can't see. That's what we address head on. In fact, about 60–70% of the use cases that Gigamon gets brought in to solve are security-related use cases. Scale has been a more and more important part of Gigamon, from being able to expand and auto-scale in a virtual environment. So as you go from one EC2 instance in AWS, let's say, by the way, we also support Azure and Google Cloud and all of that, or Cloud and so on. As you go from 1 to 50 to 100 different instances and VMs getting spun up, the visibility expands automatically. And all of this visibility and having one single platform simplifies your infrastructure tremendously. Why? Because there's a lot of things happening underneath that one platform and collecting the data, cleaning up the data, decrypting the data, and so on. And we call it sort of the duck. You can see a duck in a pond. It's moving fast. You just see the top of the duck just happily. But what's happening underneath is a lot of work, and that's the hard work that we take care of. And all of this ultimately leads to project success, ultimately leads to cost savings. So with that, I would love to answer any questions that people might have.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Bassam. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up our poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? And I encourage everyone to reply to that poll question there on the screen. So let's see, first question I wanted to ask you, Bassam, they say, we're a Gigamon customer. Does this coexist with our tap and aggregation appliance?
Right. Good question. So the answer is yes. I'm assuming that the answer is going to be around, the question is really how does this integrate with the existing environment? And that's the power of having a single fabric manager and fabric visibility. What that means is that one single user interface, we call it the fabric manager, will talk to your physical tap and ag solutions. It will talk to your VMware. By the way, it's tied into vRealize and all the VMware series of management tools. It also ties into AWS sets of tools, and so it's one platform. So if you have tap and ag and you're moving that traffic or moving that workload rather over to the cloud, it's the same interface. So that interface shows you all the data sources, the data coming in, all the target, whether it's a tool, an IDS, IPS, whatever the tool might be, and then lets you do middle things like I want to clean up the traffic, deduplicate it, I want to send only packet headers, and so on. So the short answer is yes, we support the tap and ag, 100% using the exact same tool that we're using to support very advanced container level traffic as well.
Excellent. Yeah, good design there. I like that it can integrate with what folks might already have. There's another question here. They say we're having a lot of confusion in our organization about hybrid cloud. Could this solution help us?
Good question. So yes, so that's kind of what we're built for, is a hybrid cloud environment. And I think the question behind the question here is really distributed applications. So hybrid cloud is a great term for describing a whole ball of wax of complexity, because every platform has its own set of tools and monitoring and challenges and so on, and its own behavior. As you go across cloud, that problem becomes more exponentially harder to solve. So one of the cool things we do is I mentioned single pane of glass that allows you to get visibility of the traffic. However, a lot of our customers want to use the local tools. So for example, let's say on premises, tap and ag is a basic access. In VMware, they want to use NSXT because that's the latest and greatest from VMware. We support that. If you want to use the existing management tools, we support that. In cloud, public cloud, if you want to use CloudWatch, we support that. If you want to use VPC mirroring, for example, in AWS to collect all of your traffic, great. We work with VPC mirroring. We'll collect that traffic, but we overcome obstacles or shortcomings of the existing platform. So for example, with VPC mirroring specifically, you can only have one destination of the traffic that you're collecting, which means you only have one tool that you're rolling out. It works great. But then if you have a second tool, I have a firewall and I have a monitoring and like 10 other tools. Gigamon collects the data one time from VPC mirroring, and we'll send it to the 10 tools, and we'll send exactly the type of data that the 10 tools want. So that's one difference. The other one is around scalability. So we have automatic visibility as code is what we call it. So as you go from, again, I mentioned earlier, 1 VM to 100 VM to 1,000 VM, that visibility is automatically replicated up, which is really cool because your tools are automatically getting visibility even as your workload scales. So yes, we support multi-cloud in a very, very native fashion. And it's, again, the critical thing before any kind of cloud journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can see where that could simplify hybrid and multi-cloud so much, giving companies the visibility that they need and overcoming the complexity challenge. So, and there's another question here around, having multiple tools, and I know these tools are based on the costs are based on the amount of data that they consume. Is there an option here or a use case where this type of tool could help them to potentially eliminate tools or reduce licensing on tools to kind of help with the cost challenge?
Yeah, so that is fundamentally, that tends to be, why we get brought in is I've got all of these tools and it's seeing too much traffic and I need to tap and aggregate that traffic into one place. However, and so the answer is absolutely yes. So we will streamline the traffic. So if a certain tool only needs NetFlow traffic, we will generate NetFlow all the way up to V9, I think it's the latest one, I can't remember, and we'll send that over. If some other tool, like a SIM, let's say, only wants to see certain metadata about the traffic. So I mentioned SSL certificate. When does the certificate expire? We can see all of that. So we'll send just that data over to your SIM. So rather than having to ingest all NetFlow or all packets. So by doing that, by reducing the traffic, and I mentioned deduplication alone is over half the packets are duplicate packets in any decent sized deployment. Well, by taking out duplicate packets, if you think about it, the tools are now only seeing half the traffic. So all of a sudden we've gone from, let's say a tool that's at 80% capacity, put Gigamon there, taking out duplicate packets, it instantly drops to 40% capacity. So if you're looking to upgrade a tool this year, Gigamon allows you to delay that for a pretty significant amount of time. And deduplication is just one aspect. There's lots of other simple flow mapping, taking out irrelevant traffic. We also have application intelligence through our deep packet inspection. So for example, if you have Spotify traffic going through your network, if you have Netflix or YouTube or something, you can choose to say, you know what, take out all of the streaming traffic, not from all of my tools. My security tools still want to see all traffic, but maybe my DLP does not need to see Netflix or Spotify traffic. Maybe this other tool does not need to see, only needs to see certain traffic. So by being able to laser sharp focus which traffic the tools get to see, you are saving the cost tremendously. So that's one area. And one other small area that we also help is port interface. So if you have a 4 gig port on a tool and you've upgraded a network to 10 gig, that tool is basically, it needs to go on the shelf. With Gigamon, we can deal with that interface speed differential and only send 4 gigs worth of traffic to that tool and let you bring that tool back online. So I have to also mention that during the whole COVID thing, the ROI, the IT budget cutbacks and so on, we've been deployed more than typical because of the ROI that we provide, not just on Gigamon product, but across the board in the entire tool stack.
Excellent. All right. And so a final question we probably have time for here, and that is, they say, this sounds interesting, but I'm not sure if we need it. Is there a try and buy option?
Yes, there's various, I'll be very quick, various levels of try before you buy. If you want to look at the cloud product, we have, if you go to our website, We have a self-drive, so it turns on our cloud product for I think an hour. You can just go play with it. There's videos that you can have side-by-side play with it. We also have on the same page our on-premises version. By the way, it's the same UI, so it won't be any surprise to you. But then the data is coming from on-premises, so you can try that self-drive as well. If you want, we can provide you with the product ourselves. We can help you set it up in your environment. We can help you run proofs of concept. So there's various levels of testing the product, and I would highly recommend just let us talk to you and see how it might be able to help your environment if you currently don't have Gigamon in place, because it does provide a lot of value, not just by being able to centralize traffic, but really around optimizing your tools, but also helping you with your innovation projects.
Awesome. All right. Well, excellent presentation. Again, Bassam, thank you so much for being on the event today.
My pleasure, and thanks to everybody for attending.
I encourage everyone to check out the handouts tab there for additional information on the Gigamon solution. There's a resource there entitled Mind the Cloud Visibility Gap, the structural deficiency in your digital infrastructure and how to close it. Excellent resource. Of course, also visit gigamon.com for more information. Thank you to everyone who responded to the poll. I encourage you, if you haven't yet, to respond to that. It's on the screen. I'll leave that up while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going to Jennifer Curtin from North Carolina. Congratulations, Jennifer Curtin from North Carolina. Still one more gift card to give out and one more expert presenter. Speaking of which, I'm excited now to introduce you to Mr. Mike Oakes, Senior Pre-Sales Engineer at A-Tempo. Mike, it's great to have you on.
Hey, thanks, David.
Take it away.
So,
Tell us about A-Tempo.
Sure. Okay, sorry. A little lag there. I apologize. So, first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As David mentioned, my name is Mike Oakes. I am a Senior Solutions Architect with A-Tempo, and I've been in the compute and storage industry now about 30 years, a little over 30 years. And real quick, what I'd like to do, introduce you a little bit about A-Tempo, and then talk more about our AI offering. Who's A-Tempo? Sorry about that little skip there. So who is A-Tempo? So A-Tempo, we bring to bear over 30 years of experience in the field of data protection and management. We have, as a slide note, 2,000 customers, well north of 2,000 customers now, and 200 employees worldwide. And what we enable, and we're going to talk a little bit about our Myriad suite of portfolio, which is now being enhanced with our analytics package. And we enable organizations to preserve and manage their data ecosystems, regardless of that data set size, location, the organization size. And data is usually the lifeblood of any organization. So understanding where it lies and how it's being utilized, consumed, created, it's becoming more and more important in today's 24/7 infrastructure. So our solutions now with the AI package allow us to scan, protect, store, facilitate movement, and provide easy searchable functionality for quick retrieval of data placement, or data that's been placed. So these solution sets, I want to mention this real quickly, that we provide are a software model appliance. So we don't provide any hardware. You can reuse your own. You can take advantage of some existing hardware. If you want to buy some new hardware, you can do that. We have sizing guides and so forth, and we work with our customers and our partners, to size up the solutions. And they're usually not very big. When we talk about sizing guides for servers, it's 1U, 2 CPU box, maybe use a VM depending on the workflow. So, and again, these AI solutions that we're talking about, they fully integrate with our Myriad portfolio suites of archive, backup, migration, copy, sync, and move. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we go along. So real quickly here. So what did we see, and what did we see in the market space is the challenges of, petascale or managing petascale data silos, right? And the first one, of course, is you need to understand the environment. So where's all the data located? What's the landscape look like, so to speak, that data landscape? And then once you've done that, start to identify the data, right? So, and that's identifying, metadata that's with it, where it's located, localization, all the different nuances that go along with the data workflow, right? And that includes abnormalities. I'm going to speak about abnormalities coming up. And then, of course, taking that information, right, to reduce data silos. There's no need these days to have 4 or 6 copies of the same data in 3 or 5 or 6 different locations. So how to reduce data silos and then improve those data workflows. Right? How do I get things bigger, faster. We'll call it bigger, faster, smarter because it's analytics. But it's more importantly, how do I get things, or how do I best utilize the infrastructure I have, most effectively use the infrastructure I have? And of course, the last one, what's on everybody's mind, right? It's save time, money, and manpower. It's return on investment. If I can use my equipment in a more 7x24, let's say, workflow cycle, the better off my ROI is. So those are the 5 top things we saw in the marketplace that needed to be addressed. So real quickly, how do you do that? Right? Now this becomes important, right? Because you have to start to go through some type of orderly step to get to that end expectation or end usage or act and return on investment. So first you got to do is you got to discover, right? So what is my data? Right? Where's my data? You know, understanding the data in its entirety of a life cycle. When's it hot? When's it not? Which goes into the analyze phase. And that's, like I said, when's hot, when's not, duplicates, anomalies. And I'm going to use the example of anomaly. When normal things happen in your environment, maybe on a Tuesday, you get a 10 terabyte dump from somewhere. That's normal. You expect that to happen. You don't really need to be alerted on that. You need to be alerted when it doesn't happen because something's gone wrong. Now, the AI package, what we have, actually starts to learn about data patterns and learn about workflows. And I want to make a note here. This package stays on site because we're talking about learning about your data, right? Learning about your data flows. Nothing comes back to a tempo. Nothing goes back to some servers in the cloud for an analysis unless that's what you choose to do. We don't take any analysis on your data. It's your data. We want you to keep it, and it's secured in your location. So after all that stuff is analyzed, we've ingested all that information into the servers. We're taking a look at it. We're taking a hard look at some certain things. You need to start to decide, right? That decision factor comes into place. What should I do with my data? What can I do with my data? And some of these things, right, maybe simply is building a better dashboard. So people start to understand, start small, build up. You know, start to understand the workflow, start to understand what's going on with the data. And the last thing, though, that comes into play is this act decision, right? So let's start to make some business decisions, whether it be manual, automatic, on the information we've gleaned from all this discovery phase. And these 4 are the steps we've taken that we think effectively work for an analytics tool. So how do you go about discovering petabytes of non-compartmentalized data, right? So where does it all reside? And how do you know it's scattered across different storage environments, different organizations, right? The model previously was I had some storage in one location in a project. Just let them work. They may not even be in the same location, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the nature of the business we're in. But so how do you start discovering now where all that's located? How do we really present it? How do you look at the key metrics, effectively utilize those assets, right, that you have at your disposal? So this is just a representation of one of the dashboards you can create. You can create many dashboards on your own. This one here is taking a look at, you know, data usage, maybe size and age. But you can drill into a lot of different facets, right? You can get very granular, run reports, and tune these metrics and these dashboards to start to get into that, basically that life cycle management, that data workflow you need to start addressing within your organization. But so how do you do that? Right? That first step I talked about was discovering the data, right? That's one of the crucial steps. So to discover that data, right, you want to start looking at basically, I skipped a slide, I apologize. You want to start looking at that online and offline data. Now it could be disk, tape, cloud, right? You want to interrogate it. Basically you're inventorying. You're scanning that local, that shared, that remote access to start understanding everything that's in each location. Now each location is getting a fingerprint, you know, just like an ID. So you need to be able to identify different storage models or different storage pools in different locations and everything underneath it. So that inventory of that fingerprint, that ID, that's taken into account, that's ingested, all that metadata, all the current information within each of those data silos. And then we do perform continuous monitoring in this discovery phase, and that's to learn about data patterns, right? But it's also like the alert on anomalies. And the system will start to learn data patterns and learn about your data patterns, so it start to give you information back on certain things it's seen. You can set your own key metrics and key criteria, or you can take some of the defaults that we've already built into the tool. So once you've collected that information, right, now you need to start. The analysis starts to happen. Sorry. So you start to analyze, and here's some key things you can analyze. I want to look at hot and cold. Right? I want to look at, is my data local to where it's being accessed from? Right? Data usage, age, timestamps. So you're talking about all the different timestamps. So creation or birth time, modification, last access, all of those things. User, UID, GI, all that information gets collected. So you can start to actually take an analytic look at maybe a user who hasn't been there in 6 years. Why is his information on my primary storage? I don't want it there. Get rid of it. Now, that goes to the bottom bullet. You can start to tag, if you so choose, data for archiving, backup. I want to move it somewhere. I want to tier it. And this is where the hooks into the Myriad suite of portfolio that I talked about earlier comes into play. Because you can start to automatically have things happen on business decisions you've made. We'll alert you and make no decisions to move anything unless you so tell us to, or set up some algorithm to say, you know what, I've hit this criteria. It's on my production storage, and it's 6 months old. I want it archived. And it's 6 months or newer. I want it backed up. And I have 3 copies of it in 3 different locations. I only want to keep 2, and I want to keep it not both on prod. Put it on tier 2 and put it in the cloud, or tier 2 and maybe tape. So you start to be able to take some actions after this analysis, have the analyze and decide phase. So coupled with that, right, so now we're talking about acting. So this is where integrating with the Myriad portfolio I was talking about. So the first one you see, right, move, copy, delete. This basically gets into what I was just talking about a second ago. The ability to look at the data, make some key decisions on that data, from some business decisions. Do I need it on production, yes or no? Do I need multiple copies of it? Do I want 4 copies of it? And if so, where do I want them, right? And start doing things by age or other criteria. If things are hot. A real interesting one that's a use case that we can see a lot of people using is the efficiency of storage. Maybe you have a system in New York that is busy from 8 to 5, but it's basically idle from 6 in the night to 6 in the morning. How can I best utilize that downtime? How do I keep that storage in play? More, maybe not 7 by 24, maybe it's 7 by 20, right? So I'm getting a better return on my investment because I'm constantly keeping my asset in play. And also that goes to now crypto lockers, prevent crypto lockers. So crypto lockers do have some certain signatures, we can start to pick those out. But also what you'll see, and what we've noticed is with crypto lockers, they start to modify files in a particular way. So you start to see this repetition happening, which is not normal. So we can start to alert on that, warn you, hey, something's abnormal in this file system. You need to go take a look. This file, and something else is being acted upon by this particular task or some type of nefarious act. I'm going to skip the ROI one for just 1 second and jump to enhanced tiering, and that ties into the movement part of it. So being able to use my tier 1 really for true production. Anything that's old, 2-3 months, hasn't been accessed, move to tier 2, right? Or move it to tier 3. Maybe you want to push it to the cloud. Maybe you want to use it in conjunction with the cloud. You see it says managing hybrid clouds here. I call it managing hybrid infrastructures now because it's all kinds of dissimilar architectures, homogeneous architectures you want to put in heterogeneous infrastructure. So how to manage to the cloud. Maybe you want people to be able to tag and move data up, but you don't want them to have them recall things because using a public cloud, you want to pay the egress charges. So how do you manage that? How do you actually say people can access the data, but I want to give them approval process to go get it, so I'm not paying somebody decide they want to egress a petabyte. But also taking a look at how often things are being accessed up on the cloud, because if there is things on the flip side constantly being recalled from, say, a public cloud or maybe tape, that's probably not the place for it. It probably needs to be somewhere else, right? It needs to be someplace that's quicker, isn't cost you as much to come out of the cloud or the network resources. So that's where data placement comes into play and where it's being accessed from and localized. The last one, of course, ROI actions. All of that ties into return on investments, because if I can keep my assets in play for greater hours of the day, but not overwhelm resources, so I don't have a user who thought he was accessing a system locally in London, but's really got a system remote in New York and didn't know, Well, we can see that type of information going, that traffic going on, right? So, hey, let's get the data closer to or data resource closer to the user where it's needed, or get the user's task closer to the data instead of wasting network bandwidth. Excuse me. So some of those key benefits, right? I just mentioned localized devices and data. Right? The closer you get, the faster they run. The tasks and data models run that much quicker. Therefore, you have other time freed up for other resources to run instead of doing things across a network or a wide area network. Identifying and specifying data. Now, that's both for data for anomalies, right? That we talked about, learning about what's normal, what's abnormal on our data silo, but also strictly identifying the data, right? Whether I want to tag it or not is irrelevant. I need to know everything about it. What's that data landscape look like? Where's everything reside? So I can start making the best business decisions for my organization. Organizing data pools goes into the localization, right? So keeping things localized as much as possible. It's not always possible, but the more efficient you can make the workflow, the more efficient you make the assets in the organization run. The two big ones at the bottom kind of go hand in hand. So getting insights to make the best business decisions, of course, that's critical to have in any analytics tool. If I can't give you the proper information, you can't act upon it. And that directly relates into ROI, or saving that money through both automation and storage optimization. Placement, am I using the right type of storage? Am I using spinning disks or SSDs? If I'm using SSDs, am I really getting the full benefit out of them? Right? Was it worth the investment to actually buy those SSDs? Right, so you can start to take a look at some really nice things under the hood. So why analytics from Tempo? Well, first of all, we've been doing, as I mentioned, petascale data management now for 30 years. This was a little south of 30 years, 28, 29 years. But it's fully integrated with that package, that Myria package. And I want to make a note here. This is another tool with the product. This is not an extra cost or an extra fee. With Myria, we're going to give you, basically we call them pillars. This is going to be another pillar to the Myria portfolio. So there's no extra fee, a whole kind of extra services coming with the product, because it's your data. You need to know where it is. You need to know how to act upon it. You know how to manage it. Right, it goes right into that bullet number 2. So ability to act upon those analytic results. Now, whether you want to tag it manually and say I want to archive and back up or move or something along those lines, or you want to have us do it automatically, both available in the tool. You start to make those decisions which best works for your environment and your workflows. And straight into backup, archive, and move. And the reason why I put this at the end is those pillars I'm just talking about. Those basically are, these are the 4 pillars of Myria. We're adding a 5th if you want to think about the analytics package. So at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, Myria for backup, Myria for archiving. We've been doing this, as I said, 28, 30 years now. It's battle tested. It's been around. We've been evolving this product, so it's got a rich feature set underneath. What's been added to it is the products at the 3 o'clock, the 9 o'clock, and not counting the analytics package I was talking about. So migration, think about this as I'm going to consolidate storage and turn something off. I need to rent the software for X amount of time, maybe 3 months. Maybe then we're going to move all the data and shut off maybe some type of storage. Maybe it's an Iceland, a NetApp, a GPFS, a Lustre, or something. So we're going to something bigger, better, faster on the other side. And then the software, when it's done, you turn it off. It's basically a license for the amount of time you need it. Now, the thing with the analytics tool is it allows you to go, let me go take a look at this storage I need to move. Let me go find out the number of directories, the number of files, how busy, when it's hot, when it's not, when's the best time to move it, right? Is it already IOPS starved? I mean, is it going to take longer than expected because the storage is actually at 92% utilization, about 20 hours a day? But so you start to be able to plan and better understand how long a migration is going to take. And then you have the Myria for data moving, right? So think of it as copy, sync, move, synchronization. Want to act upon something, want to move data from 3 different locations to 1. You can do that with the Myria archiving tool, the Myria for data moving tool, or the analytics can be told, you know what, I want to move this stuff from location A to location B. And we'll automatically do it under the hood for you. Now, the backup, data moving, and archiving, think of those as a perpetual or ongoing support-based products. So you get licensing fees, and basically you have support. So those are the 4 products or the 4 pillars of Myria. Plus, we're adding, like I said, the analytics package, fully integratable. So real quickly, where does this product fit? So if you notice here, we talk about everything from education and research, and it says other. I'll use cloud for other because it's everything else that's used to catch all with cloud. But education and research, we work with universities, research hospitals around the world. The M&E space is kind of where we got started. If anybody remembers, say, Tempo ADA, Tempo Digital Archive, back in the 90s, early 90s, that's where we got started in this. And we manage customers, Hollywood space, hundreds of petabytes in size, data management, both tape and disk. And of course, you have the finance, insurance, and health industry. Those kind of get grouped together a lot because they have a lot of the same regulatory, not all, but some of the regulatory and security things that need to be with encryption, right? With detecting with the anomalies and so forth. So those are really, it's what we'll say 2 markets, but they're kind of grouped together, so to speak, in a vertical. And then of course you have the government, industry, retail, and then other cloud. The one thing about the cloud, we'll look in the cloud from an analytics perspective. We can also, when we start giving you information, we can start to tell you're running this much data in one cloud, this much data in another. We can use cloud as both source and target. So if you find out it's cheaper for you to move from one type of cloud provider to another, we can facilitate that movement. You don't have to depopulate and repopulate. We'll pull the data out via one of our data movers and push it back into that other cloud medium or portions thereof. You can start to split things up. Put things that make sense for your business model. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David for questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. We do have some questions for you from the audience, Mike. While we do that, I know we've got a couple of polls here. I want to poll everyone's responses to, get your feedback out there in the audience. First question is on the screen, and that is, what is your volume of petascale data? What's your petascale data set size? We want to hear from you, and I'll share the results of this one here in just a moment. Let's see, Mike, first question that came in I wanted to ask you about is around data classification. They're asking, is that one of the steps that folks go through to leverage Myria?
So from an analytics standpoint, yeah. So think about it as in that discover phase, right? You want to classify, or you can start to classify your data after you understand the landscape. And then how do you act upon it, right? So classifying is an important step to understanding your entire end-to-end workflow and what needs to be done to best optimize for your business model.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Next question. What type of data can be collected through the Discover agent, they're asking?
So just about any type of data. So we don't have any restriction. Now, we're of course, file system based on blocks. So we're talking about collecting data on a file system. We'll collect all the metadata that goes with the file names, all that other information. If there's alternate streams with the data, we'll collect that as well. So you get a full picture of that data in all the different locations, if it's in multiple locations where it's residing.
Okay, interesting, good. Again, I want to remind everyone about the poll question. We appreciate your responses. I'll share the results from that in just a moment. Let's move on to the next question here. What's the cost for the analytics solution, or what's the licensing model around that?
So it's included. If you have already purchased a Myria suite of products from us, this will just be another, I call it a pillar, so there's no add-on cost.
Nice. That's a big benefit there. Yeah, and then what about using analytics for tiering? Can it help when it comes to data tiering?
Yeah, absolutely. So and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So you may have some data, we'll say on tier 1, that's 6 months old, or to use that's not even no longer with the organization. You can go through and look for all their files, and maybe you want to tier them off to tier 1 or tier 2, or put them on tape and delete them from the primary storage or the production storage. All you can do underneath the hood, whether it's automated or manual with tagging, you get to do both.
Okay, excellent. And then let me bring up our next question here for the audience. The question on your screen is, what additional information would you like about the A-Tempo solution? And I appreciate the questions coming in. Don't forget about our best question prize as well. We're running that today. So keep those good questions coming. Next question here, they're asking, do you support Wasabi or Azure?
Yes, so Wasabi, Azure, GCP, S3, Amazon, straight Amazon, Swift. So just put all the big ones.
Nice, nice. And then I know you mentioned the 4, now 5 pillars of the Myria product. Can folks license those individually, or how does that work?
Yeah, so when you basically purchase the Myria product, other than we'll say the migration portion, because that's you're going to migrate data, turn it off, and you're done. All the others are licensable. You get the whole suite of products underneath the hood with the tool or the appliance when you buy it, and then you just turn on and license what you need.
Excellent. And then there's a question here. Is this hardware or software or both? How's it packaged?
All software from us. As I mentioned earlier, it's you can use your own hardware, repurpose your own hardware, and we have configuration guides to help size, and our PS teams help size up solutions for people.
Very nice. And then what about protecting data that's in a SaaS like Microsoft Office 365? There's a question here. Can A-Tempo help to protect that?
From a protection point of archiving and backing up, yes. The Myria tool is more of an unstructured. Think of it as an unstructured data tool, but it can be used for backing those type of things up, archiving and moving data around.
Very nice. And what's the most common use case where you see A-Tempo really stepping in and like making a huge difference?
So there's actually 2 places. I see that one is, especially with COVID, right? Everybody's working from home. So the storage models or storage appliances being used are at different locations. Some need to be consolidated. Data needs to be moved between things to get it more localized to the users. So facilitating that workflow and also helping to expand and collapse different data centers and different silos and understanding where all that data resides in relevant use cases to the users or the applications, we really bring that to the forefront where people can see that, take advantage, and make a business decision on how best to implement or utilize their current assets.
Okay, nice. And then when you talk about migration, Myria for migration, what are you typically migrating from and to? Is it from one storage array to another storage array? Is it from on-prem to off-prem, or all of the above?
Could be all of the above. So you could be, I'm going to use we'll say we're collapsing a colo facility, or you're collapsing a colo facility. Maybe you have 3 different types of NASs in there, and you're moving it to a new facility, we'll say in New Jersey. It's bigger, better, faster storage, maybe storage and analytics on it. So we can do that collapsing, and we allow you to take many to one to many to many. You can get very granular. You can put it in multiple locations. It all depends on what your workflow need is and the business requirement is.
Okay, excellent. And so if folks want to get started with Myria, what's the best way to go about it?
Of course, hit our website, www.tempo.com. You can get a hold of a person like me or one of our other sales engineers. You can also request for demos and POCs. It does come, the 4 pillars right now as they sit come with a 15-day temp license, so you can start playing with archiving, backup, migration, copy, sync, and move.
Very nice. All right. Well, Mike, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. I appreciate your presentation. Thanks for being on the event today.
All right, guys. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Mike. For more information on the A-Tempo Myria solution, check out the handout that's there in your audience console. You can download that. It's a resource on the multiple pillars, as Mike talked about, of Myria and all the different benefits and features that it offers you. Of course, also check out the A-Tempo website as well, atempo.com, for more information. And with that, it's now time for our final gift card winner on the EcoCast today. I'm going to bring up the prize winner right now. I appreciate you responding to the poll. If you haven't done so already, please check out the poll that's on the screen. Our final Amazon $500 gift card is going to Timothy Rollins from Arizona. Congratulations to Timothy Rollins from Arizona. I'll post all 3 prize winners from today there in the questions box. All right, thanks to everyone who responded to the poll. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, our 10 on Tech podcast, and also over on YouTube. All of our events are recorded and posted up on YouTube. If you are a future sponsor of an upcoming event, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We'd love to chat with you about presenting on an upcoming MegaCast or EcoCast. And finally, I hope that you'll join us on another upcoming EcoCast entitled Healthcare Health Check, Assessing IT Products and Services to Streamline Healthcare Operations, happening on May the 12th. It's there that you'll hear from OutSystems, Sophos, ServiceNow, Atempo, Rubrik, Pure Storage, and CrowdStrike. Hope to see you on that EcoCast. If you aren't registered already, as soon as I end the event here, you'll be automatically redirected to our events landing page where you can register for all of our upcoming Actual Tech Media events. All right, thanks to everyone who joined us on the EcoCast today. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.